Hmm. We're on live. I'm just trying to figure out something. Doesn't seem to be working. Let me try. Oh man, I'm trying to figure this out.
You're trying to figure out the Instagram or
No,
the other
we're
two?
live right now. Everybody, thank you. We're live right now. No, yeah, Instagram's a little trickier. Once you're live, if you stream as public, you're at the top of your feed on Instagram. Okay, we're gonna start. I'm gonna do the old school way because I don't want to miss this on Instagram. I got to test it more tomorrow. But we are live now, folks. Just give me like 30 seconds, real quick. All right, let's make sure. Instagram live. Okay, we're good to go. Hello, everybody. Hope all is well wherever you are tuning in. I'm super excited to be able to relaunch Disrupt the Chaos. I did a lot during COVID, then it sat dormant for a while. And I'm just grateful to be in partnership with Cooperation Jackson, who's the sponsor for this. I'm definitely looking for sponsors and volunteers. So if you want to do either one, please email me at clementerosa at gmail or DM me on Instagram, and there's a lot happening today. There's always a lot of craziness. So again, and also to V Day, who also helped get me resources. Then my show tomorrow is the first time I'm doing the show. Is called This Is Black Latinx. You know, I waited to launch it as a complete intervention around the language of Hispanic Heritage Month, but there's a lot of incredible work happening, and my work really differs from a lot of folks who their work is connected maybe in Colombia, Brazil, even Puerto Rico, Cuba, but I am going to be talking to Afro Black Latinx identified folks who were born here, grew up here, no matter where their nation is, because I think there's a very specific um, community, and I also know there's so many historical moments between African American, Latinx folks, Puerto Rican folks, and I want to like uplift the organizations, the authors, business owners that are here, and hopefully young people will join and ask any question. That's what the show's about. So here we are. So listen, my first guest is the most amazing person ever. I keep her on the phone for 2 hours. Even though she has a full-time job and is a movement organizer and has a family. Um, but I was so blessed when I spent that year in LA almost, yeah, over 10 years ago to meet Nana Gyamfi. And we were teaching both at Cal State LA. Nana is now the executive director of BAJI, the Black Alliance, executive director, Black Alliance for Just Immigration, BAJI, a Black US based national organization that fights for the rights of Black migrants and African Americans to improve the conditions of Black diasporic communities and advance racial justice and migrant rights. She has served as the president of the National Conference of Black Lawyers, executive director of Black Women's Forum, an organization that was co founded by Congresswoman Maxine Waters. She is also a former professor in the Pan African Studies Department at California State University, Los Angeles, and a radio show that she hosts in Los Angeles, California. And also, Nana is a movement lawyer. We already knew each other. We were in communities with each other, but I wasn't supposed to get arrested at this protest that happened. Because
What happened was
what happened was this. I got a pre-doc fellowship, and I moved to Los Angeles with my family during the August of the Ferguson Rebellion, and then I started meeting people, and then I ended up in this community called a village called Saint Elmo Village, and we moved in to one of the houses there. For the first month, we were with Dr. Melina Du and her family, and then of course BLM was just, it was there. It was like you're not escaping it. And I moved in, and that's how I met Patrice Colors. So it was like a little crazy because I then go to a meeting and people were like, "Who are you?" And I was like, "Hi, I'm Rosa. I'm a Black Puerto Rican. That's my daughter," kind of thing. But there was a protest. It was the first one to take over the highways. I literally did go there as a journalist, okay? Because even my husband's like, "We've been here 5 weeks. Do not get arrested." I'm like, "I'm not going to get arrested." And I got arrested. But it wasn't my fault. It was the cops' fault. It was their fault for pulling the guns. I'm a journalist, but I'm like, I'm not going to let nothing like that go because I'm not really like a journalist like that. I'm going to intervene. I did. We were arrested. Like 50. It's the craziest, most beautiful thing I've been part of. And then like a year later, they were like, we're gonna take you out of court. And Nana was our lawyer. And I just remember being like, they're going to spend all this money for us six people, misdemeanors. And the thing I remember the most, I mean, we were there day to day, like 9 to 5, day to day. Then we would make sure we're eating, come back. But when Nana did her closing remarks, and I use this now all the time, she invoked Dr. King and Rosa Parks and was like, they have never been arrested, but my clients have. That's a problem. And I was like, yes, like, wait a minute. They never, well, that's what Martin Luther King got arrested. But what Nana would say was like nobody was taken to trial. So of course they got arrested, Dr. King and Rosa Parks, but they didn't go through a trial. And they spent like a lot of money, and we were there for like 3.5 weeks. And it was just for me, Nana, like it was to see the legal experience from that, and to see that most of the court officers were Latinos because it was in East LA, but then to have this incredible judge. I remember she was Judge Bourne. I remember that because we were like, oh, like the movies kind of thing. But also I had never been like saw a jury be composed. And I didn't know. I would have never thought just even get a jury would take longer than the actual trial itself,
Yep.
right? So now Nana's out there here been doing the work, especially with Baji. So Nana, thank you for being our first guest. I have so much love and respect for you and what you do for the movement. And I'm so glad that we were in each other's worlds since you went to Cornell Law, knew Dr. Turner. I went there, not at the same time, but we are also part of that world. So thank you for coming on and being our first guest.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited. First of all, I'm really excited for the work that you are doing consistently, with commitment and dedication and fire and passion. I'm so glad that Disrupt the Chaos is back because chaos is back. Not to say it wasn't chaotic, but we can see the chaos agents are back and they're doing their dirty work. And so this is really important, what you're doing here, what you've been doing, the fact that this is back on the block and happening, and making sure that we're able to push past all of the noise, because it is a lot of noise. It is a lot of chaos. It is meant to keep us breathless and tired and confused. And we need folks like you, Rosa, to help us to be calm, to be energized, to be clear. So very glad to be here and hope I can add a little bit to the disruption that we're trying to do here.
Yeah, and for me, once I knew about Baji, I had never thought in that way of immigration. I just assumed like it was mostly Latinos, right? Like I wouldn't, and Haitians, of course, and Cubans, but I would have never been able to understand. Okay, but now we're also seeing, Chinese immigrants coming to this country, and the rhetoric is so gross and disgusting, but also I know that immigration movement and spaces have to include Black African people, and I'm so happy to have Baji who gives me that type of information all the time. So right now, let's just go Springfield, Ohio. Please explain.
So, I mean, the thing is, I think it's important for people to recognize a couple of things. Firstly, what we're hearing in terms of the anti-Black racist venom that we're hearing, particularly around this Springfield issue. This is part of a continuum, right? This is not some weird thing that just popped out of somebody's head and it's just happening now. This is part of a continuum of a type of xenophobia that is particular to Black people because of anti Blackness. And
Hmm.
so, when you look at this attack on people's food, that's like anti Black 101, right? You have African Americans to this day that don't want to be photographed eating watermelon. Why is that? Right?
Mm.
Because there's this negativity that's been associated with like delicious watermelon and delicious fried chicken. Like you're
Right.
supposed to be embarrassed that you eat that. And then
Mm.
we can take that to, Afro Boricuan food. We can point to all of these places where we're being told that how we eat is subhuman, right? That we eat like animals somehow, that we're not, the refinement of human dietary predilections are not what we have until it becomes popular to them, right? Now you can't buy oxtails, okay? But when I was younger, and we described to people what oxtails were, people would hold their nose up. White folks were disgusted. And now they're making oxtail pizza, oxtail this, oxtail that. It
Yeah.
becomes
Yeah.
a delicacy, right? And so there is this general anti-Blackness about Black food. The
Mm.
immigrant aspect of it and the Haitian aspect in particular is sort of how it unfolds, right? How this particular anti-Black narrative, this particular story unfolds, because Haitian people, because of the revolution that they had, because it was rooted in not just their resistance, but in their very African spirituality, right? Because it was rooted in their Africanness, that, their Blackness in that African form, it's seen as and always presented as violent and savage and somehow, and animalistic and involving ritual and all of these other pieces that even though if you know Haitian people, they are, sometimes too respectable for me in the norm, right? As our people can tend to be. They are, it's very important for them to be dignified and to, to have their dignity respected, to respect the dignity of others. There's a refinement. I mean,
Mm.
complete opposite to what that narrative is. And so all of this, we're talking about hundreds of years of narrative about Black people, about African people, about Haitian people, now culminating in something that you could not say about white migrants. You couldn't say that these Ukrainians that are coming in now are stealing people's pets and eating cats and dogs. You just could not say that, particularly at a presidential debate, without it being
Yeah.
like, heck no, stop everything, roundly and soundly condemned. That didn't happen in this debate. Absolutely did not. People kind of and shook their head, but no one, there was not a hey, this is ridiculous, except for one of the reporters who was surprising to hear, who called it out as racist in the moment. But that didn't happen by, of course, neither the candidate that spoke it nor the candidate that heard it, right? And so, and to this day, I'm still looking for this administration. I'm still looking for these campaigns to open up their mouths and to say, hey, that's absolutely unacceptable. Racist, anti Black, anti Haitian will not be tolerated, and to be as soundly, full chestedly denounced as anti abortions, right? Abortion bans, as so many other things that we heard really passionately described, right? There's no passionate defense of the Haitian people, no passionate defense of Black migrants, of African Americans, of Black folks, the Afro Latinx folks, of Black folks. Just that's not there.
Yeah, and I mean, you would think that out of political interest, at least the Biden and Harris administration and Harris would already be there. Like, see, so the thing is, like, You need to win Florida. It's the biggest Haitian population after Haiti. Why aren't you going right now? Even if it's a political interest, like because you I'm sorry. It's so Haitians like what these campaigns are thinking is like, well, they're always going to vote for us. Like that's just it, which is also not true. Like specifically Caribbean folks, like you can't just assume that. And also, it's inhumane what's happening. It's like I really didn't want it for a moment. I was like, I'm not even going to address this because I just find it so insane that like but then I see it and I get it. I mean, like the thing is too, if folks don't know, yeah, it's not it did just not happen. First, Haitians were welcome there. And like one thing about Ohio, because a lot of my family grew up from Puerto Rico to Ohio, right? You know, once the steel mills and industries folded in the late 80s to the early 90s, a lot of these cities are dormant. So here you have an entire new population that's coming in that's going to have resources to buy food and have some have an apartment. They're
Increase
working
your census numbers. Increase
right,
your census
right.
numbers. Look, my brother Pius Ali, who's the mayor pro tem in Portland, Maine, comes from Ghana, first Muslim elected, African elected to city council. Remember when 44 and a half sent did the first busing and bus people to San Antonio and Portland? He was
Yeah,
like, bring it on, baby. We need more people. We ain't got enough people up here. So we're happy with that.
yeah. And you said Portland, Maine, right?
Portland, Maine. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, in upstate in this area to the New England area, like it again, it's been immigrants who are saving these communities that've been on the decline. You know, but I'm glad you started off with like some. I think like people get it, like the food thing, right? Because the minute you said it reminded me of course, you know, bringing my lunch to school and being made fun of when my Asian friends brought their being made fun of, right? And then you're right, like the system or capitalism co-ops it's like the avocado. It's like we've been eating them things for hundreds of years. You didn't like them before. Now there's a whole industry of avocado. I'm like, I'm not paying $12 for an avocado on some toast. Like
Claro.
there's a whole like industry, but that speaks to the capitalistic nature of like, you know, once particularly capitalism and white folks co-opt that it's like it's never been seen before. But it is distressing what's happening there. So what are the people that you know down there, folks that you know, what are they saying right now about the safety of Haitian people? Are their community people? Because I did see the parents of the young boy who was killed, and the driver was Haitian well, they say he was under the influence. But even they made a statement like, stop using our son, like, stop trying to divide us. We're humans, right? And then lastly, the person who started the whole rumor admitted he lied, but it's like too late. It's out there. So what are you hearing from folks down there?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of Baji, Ohio is not one of our main places, but thankfully we have networks, right? And so we've been able to connect with our networks with organization that is Haitian folks volunteering, doing work there, and just trying to check the temperature. What's happening there? How are people feeling? And for some people, it's really shocking. Haitians increased the population of Springfield by 25%. That is like how many Haitians are there. And again, to your point, initially, had the typical issues of racism, etc., but not this targeting of Haitian people. And so I think partly they're in shock because people who they were working with and going to school with and doing carpools with and all of this, now suddenly it feels like some of those people have turned against them out of the blue based on something that everyone knows is a lie, right? And clearly racist and outrageous. There always, there's a fear factor. People are feeling nervous. And, it makes sense. When people were calling COVID the Chinese flu and all of that, suddenly we saw Asian folks, regardless of their origin, being attacked, and of course the murders of the Korean women, for example, in the mall. You know, all of these things when you have this anti, right, Asian sentiment,
Yeah.
whether it's because you're mad at China, mad at COVID, whatever it is. And so you see the same thing happening here, where now you have bomb threat at the school, and then you have like some threats that are real and some that are you're not sure if they're real or not, but it doesn't matter. Now everything sorts of escalates, and you want people not to feel frightened, excuse me, but it's hard for them not to feel frightened. And so they're trying to cool people in the community down. They're trying to cool the temperature down because this is like a fireball that was just thrown at them. They were living their regular lives. And then all of a sudden, this has happened. And then I also have been reaching out to folks in Ohio that are helping out the Mauritanian community. One of the highest percentages of Mauritanians living in the United States live in Ohio and Pennsylvania. So reaching out to them, reaching out to the Congolese, the Cameroonian community. Why? They're also feeling the heat. Because
Right.
to these ignoramuses,
Yeah,
they
they're
don't
all the
know a
same.
Haitian from a
Yeah.
Ghanaian, from a Cameroonian, from a
Mm,
Mauritanian. As far as they're concerned, you a dark skinned person. If you know, either I don't understand what you're saying if I'm hearing you, or even without hearing you, I've just determined that you one of them. And then here comes the hate and here comes the negative energy. And so it's a situation in which people, yes, are feeling frightened, but people also are doing what we always do in those circumstances, which is to, then huddle together, right? Get closer, pay more attention, look out for each other's safety, do those kinds of things. And, I think that for some folks, they're hoping it blows over. I don't know how blowing over it's going to happen between now and the election because they're escalating, actually. Now they're talking about HIV and everything else, right?
uh,
Um,
which they
but
did in the 80s. We're blaming Haitians for the AIDS pandemic.
Exactly. So now they're, whispering, not whispering, JD Vance is saying it, they're talking about it out here in this world. And so that, I'm like, I don't know how blowover it's gonna be. But what I am happy to hear about is that we're doing what we do, right? Which is to close ranks, to take care, to provide support. They have a lot of people, Haitian and otherwise, who are providing support, who are offering support. I do think that there's a responsibility that all candidates have, whether they be local all the way to the national, wherever you are, to speak up about this and against this, and to make it clear that this is outrageous and unacceptable, and to speak in support of Haitian migrants and other Black migrants. I think that it's important for the media. That saying, if it bleeds, it leads.
Hmm.
Stop making us be the bleeders. Stop sacrificing us on the altar of your profit making. Because again, had a comment like that been made about Ukrainian migrants, we wouldn't still be hearing about it. The media would have nipped that in the bud, and you would be a pariah for repeating it. And instead, the media is having the same people repeat it on every single station in every single space, right? In terms of mainstream media, and keeping the energy of the thing going, providing a platform not just for these comments, but for even more virulent comments, and the cycle continues.
Mm. So, what are the couple of the current campaigns that Baji is doing?
So we have a number of campaigns. I mean, one of them is a campaign that we call Blackness Is. We know that as part of this anti-immigrant push that really is coming from all over the place, that we are seeing more, particularly online schisms between African American community and Black migrant community. It's one of those things that's not necessarily happening in real life, like as people's interactions. It's happening a lot more digitally, but you and I know that what starts off digital easily
Yeah.
spills over into the streets. Like this started off digital, right?
Right.
And now it's spread into the streets. And so it's really important that we make sure that our communities are clear, that there is a definite, that when we talk about Blackness, that there is not just one kind of Blackness. And, I'm speaking to the choir, this is your work, but there is not just one kind of Blackness, right? And that the expansion, the expanded understanding of what Blackness is, particularly with respect to this country, but even beyond, doesn't take away from anyone, right? It doesn't mean that other people now suddenly lose some of their Blackness. It doesn't take them out of any position of birthright. But what it does is it allows us to actually build some power that we can flex. We've always understood that. Fannie Lou Hamer did not look at Kwame Ture and say, oh, you were born in Trinidad and you didn't come here till you were 14.
Yeah.
Right. Therefore, I'm not going to talk to you and I'm not going to work with you. Right. The Young Lords, the Black Panthers, folks didn't say, hey, you're not from this place, so forget you. That's not how it worked. We understood that we had to, that it was to our best interest to flex. And, when you look at how power is built and how power is wielded in this country and in the systems of racial capitalism, you understand why it is important for us to really look at what Blackness is and to talk about that. So that is like a power building campaign that's really based upon story and based upon our interaction and based upon organizing. We also are doing a lot on the local level to push back against criminalization. 1994 crime bill, 30-year anniversary of its signing was this past,
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
absolutely.
Mm.
And we see all of the things that we saw in the 90s, whether, coming back, right? Instead of wilding in Central Park, which resulted in the wrongful, arrests and convictions of the Central Park Five, people are wilding in the Louis Vuitton store, right? But it's still that same notion of like wild young people, young Black people running around committing crimes, quote unquote crimes. I'll put that in quotes. You have the same thing happening with the notion of Black migrants, right? It's like they are criminals, the migrants are the criminals. All of this conversation about people not being human beings, but actually being criminals, and folks focusing on enforcement as a solution as opposed to care. This is all, I'm not saying the 90s is where it all started, but clearly the late 80s, the 90s is where we see, culminating in the 94 crime bill, this move to punish, punish, punish. And
Which
so
is
whether
interesting because Reagan did what was it? The full thing. He didn't decriminalize it. What he did was like give at that time status to all right
amnesty,
undocumented people,
right?
amnesty. So you're like the Republican president. There's a lot of reasons he did that, but then linking it to the Democratic Party where we're at now. What like first explain to people what is actually happening on the border, and not only the southern border. I live near the Canadian border and people are being going that trek, which I don't even how could you, that's like a what, 8 month trek to go all the way from the southern to the northern. But um Harris's and Biden's role in just more chaos and what does happen with if Harris wins. We know, oh, you know what, if Trump wins, what does that look like? If Harris, what does it look like for our people on both borders that are dehumanized every day and are living in horrific conditions in some of the big cities here in the United States?
Let's take folks at their word, right? Let's look at their platforms. Let's listen to what they're saying and let's take them at their word. So I'm not going to talk about the hope, okay? I'm going to talk about what they're talking about. All right. So Trump is a chaos agent. So think of what's the most chaotic thing that can happen. That's what he's going to be tossing out. Day one. This is a man who day one was like Muslim and African band. Wham, let's go. Day one. Okay. So we already know that it's going to be, and he's the Title 42 guy. We already know, and Title 42 again was using COVID, which he didn't care about on the interior, as a means of closing and shutting down the border, right? And so we know that when it comes to the border, he is going to militarize the border in a way that doesn't just involve the feds, but also involves the states. So what you see Governor Abbott doing in Texas, what you see DeSantis doing in Florida, even though he is not even bordering borders. It's just ridiculous. What you see Kemp doing, right? What you see happening in Arizona. So the kinds of extras where these states are involving their local law enforcement and their state law enforcement, right? Operation Lone Star, etc. That's going to be really hyper increased under Trump, so that you're going to have the federal government and all of these different levels in terms of enforcement, and you're going to have the local, and you're going to have the state, and they're going to be throwing everything at totally militarizing the border, plus the vigilantes, right? Plus who they have right now that are on the border claiming to do their part and spending more time fighting with each other than anything else. And just to give people a hint of some of what this is, that people don't, that, doesn't even cross your mind. In Texas, they use their Amber Alert to announce 3 Haitians ran across the border.
No.
2 Mexicans ran across the border. 3 people from Central America. Their Amber Alert.
Like the Amber Alert where someone is missing?
But so that people can just run and look for the people willy-nilly. So this is what we're talking about, right? Well, and him being president, just, that's going to be even more so, and it's going to be visible because he likes the visible stuff, right? So it's going to be Malcolm X's wolf. Okay. Under the Biden administration, what we've had, and they love to call it Biden-Harris from the very beginning, so let me not take anything away from her. Under the Biden and Harris administration, what we've had has been Malcolm's fox. So they're fighting with Abbott, right, on the one hand, with Governor Abbott in terms of the public fight, but in terms of what's happening privately or undercover, that fight is really not there. So if you look at the Biden administration, they have a disproportionate number of federal convictions, federal cases that are crossing the border cases. I'm talking about over 70% of the cases. Crossing the border. I'm talking about federal cases, mind you, not federal cases about the border, federal cases generally. Crossing the border cases where people are convicted, and then once they're convicted, of course, they're deportable, right? And again, another way that people are being separated, but they're not in cages like Trump did. So you don't see the pieces. But that is absolutely happening in every effort that has been made. And we have partners such as National Immigration Project, National Immigrant Justice Center, National Immigration Law Center, like all these different groups that have said, hey, you need to actually drop it. You need to end this, having this law and take it off the books because it's inherently racist. You look at the background, the legislative background, they were like, we don't want to have mixing with the Mexicans and make mongrels. I mean, literally, that was the kind of things they were saying. And the Biden administration won't budge. The CBP app and using surveillance and using AI and all of that to collect data to surveil our people, that is going to be on the increase. This is what they've already said to us. They're going to be going after so-called human traffickers. Be clear, there's a sister who, picked up some folks in the desert, took them to a place so that they wouldn't die in the desert. She's doing 18 months now. Just went in like a month and a half again for trafficking, because that is considered human trafficking. Don't be fooled. They're not just talking, they ain't talking about P. Diddy. They talking about people trying to help people to make it and to live, right? When they're talking about fentanyl, we know that most fentanyl and drugs that come into this country come by plane. They don't come across the border, but it's an excuse to stop people, to search people. So it's going to be that. And then they have this asylum ban, which basically requires you to do things in other countries and to pass through obstacles in other countries and apply for asylum and do all these things in other countries before you even make it to the United States. Beyond being against international law and beyond being against U.S. asylum law, you're talking about disproportionate violence to Black people who are being required to be stuck in countries that aren't really nice to their own Black people. And so people are being raped, robbed, disappeared, kidnapped, all kinds of things are happening. And this is under Biden-Harris. Plus the expulsions, more deportations than ever. Has deported more folks than any other president up until this time. Detention numbers, more detained people than ever. more people imprisoned in the criminal prison system, federal prison system than ever. So this just gives you a sense. It doesn't look it. It's not out here like the big bad wolf. It's not out here looking
Yeah.
all terrifying, but it's still terrifying.
So, your family are from Ghana. So I'm always curious when you go back home, like, what do they say about what's going on here? I'm just
Well, it
curious.
depends on it depends on who we're talking
We
about and
talk,
what
I
they
know,
know.
but I'm interested in knowing, obviously, other people from out the United States and what they see and what do they think about where this country is as it regards, you know, yeah, not just, I'm not saying regards immigration, but just in general, I'm always curious about that.
It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. We just did something recently here, Baji, at the Congressional Black Caucus, like a parallel event, not in the caucus, but a parallel event with our comrades at Build Power and Kendrick Sampson. And one of the things he was talking about are the stories that Hollywood and other media have told, and that its role in US imperialism and how people think of the US, right? And so there are so many people in Ghana in other countries who still understand the United States to be this land of the free and the home of the brave. That you should be able, you know, if you get here, you're going to be able to, you know, finally find that key card to white heaven or something, you know?
Hmm.
And then people are really disappointed. I mean, we talk to asylum seekers who, of course, are happy to be out of the frying pan, but are also smelling that they might be in the fire, you know, in a different kind of way. And they're really disappointed. It's not that they're not going to still move, they're not going to still try. When I say move, they're not going to move forward, they're not going to still try, they're not going to do what they can to raise, you know, get money and send it back home. But they definitely realize that there's been a bait and switch. Like, this is not what they thought they were getting, because at home people has this vision based upon media, based upon movies, based upon people like me who may be born here or come here and then go home and don't tell the story about what we're dealing with here, how difficult it is here, how people are literally working hard to get a check and then turning their whole check over, what rent is here. You know what I'm saying? Like, how isolated we are here. At home, Rosa, we're not isolated. We're
Yeah.
not isolated. You're living with people. There's people around. Even if you're living in a Western type setup with your own apartment, you know everybody on your floor. It's
Mhm.
like you're not isolated here. I mean, what do we see? Some situation where this woman passed away at the job and they didn't even know she was in the cubicle for 4 days. They
I
didn't
know
even know the
that.
woman was there. Okay,
Yeah.
because that's what this life is. And so there's, I think people have this vision of something else and kind of don't really know what they have. And I think that you also have people that are also very clear, that understand full well that part of the reason that they are in a condition that they may not want to be in is because of US imperialism, is because of the meddling of the West in the country, is because of the exploitation in the country. They understand that life in Ghana is sweet, even if it's not wealthy, you know, and they know that they have something. And so it really depends on who you're talking about. Politics wise, I think there was a time when people had maybe more uniform concepts. When George W. Bush was president, people pretty much were like, that man's an idiot. Okay, except for the people in power, of course. When Obama was there, they were a little more excited about him, right? Because they saw like a fellow African. I think with Biden and the Biden administration, the Trump administration, it has depended on what kind of leader you want to see. Do you want to see a strong man type of leader? Do you want to see, you know, a different type? I think it's going to be interesting to see how people at home actually feel about Harris, because I think right now it's like mixed reviews. People who at home sort of have associated themselves because of their children, etc., with certain parties in the US are kind of still on that bag. And otherwise, I think people still see Harris as a little bit of a mystery. They're not really sure exactly who she is, and they're not rocking with her just because she's black. So it's going to be interesting, because we've had black presidents, not Ghana, but on the continent, we've had
Yeah.
black women presidents, we've had black presidents. So that ain't going to be enough to get us super excited, right?
Yeah, I mean, and even like she definitely had a bump, as they call it, the debate, but now like numbers are starting to show, like particularly African American men and Latino men who's saying they're not going to vote for Harris. Like, one, for me, that's also like, okay, you're a dude, patriarchy. Like, I don't believe every man. I believe, I'm sorry, there are a lot of men who won't vote for her just because she's a woman, right? Like, that whole fallacy of like, people don't understand. Like, men right now, men of color, like, there's what we're seeing more, what's being highlighted more, excuse me, are conservative men. Like, but I'm going to say this: I believe that most of the men in our communities that we roll with, are not patriarchal. But I also know that you have to kind of root that out. And what does that look like? But she hasn't done enough interviews, and I think that's what's happening now, that is kind of leveling out. Of course, it's not that Trump's doing more. Of course, now we see the second assassination attempt on the president, which
Wah, wah.
I'm like, so the secret
Girl, I'm from
service.
Africa. I don't believe these things half the time. I
Like,
come from a place where people be having mysterious one-car accidents. Not
oh,
Ghana,
oh,
per
wait,
se.
but
And you know
also,
what I'm saying? I'm like,
you're
mm.
like, he was there for 12 hours waiting and nobody saw him. I'm like,
I don't
wait,
know how you just nick somebody's ear with a high-powered rifle. But
honestly,
let me say this in terms of,
it's,
the
it's,
demographics and Harris.
yeah,
I actually don't think. I think what is being highlighted is Black men, Latinos, etc. And I think that's purposeful, right? That there's that highlight, just like they do with Chinese folks, where you think every Chinese person
yeah,
hates Black people and don't want
right,
affirmative action. Because again, when it bleeds, it leads. So
yeah,
that's what's exciting. So that's what they get on. I am very clear that who is going to be a problem for Harris, and complete transparency, I'm not a Harris girl. Okay. I'm not the Harris girl. So I let you know
neither am
that I'm
I.
not a Trump girl and I'm not a Harris girl either. So I don't, no one should take from this that I'm like secretly, no, I'm not in any way. We have two different paths. We started, our ways are very similar, and then we somehow diverge, right, in terms of our own histories, right? But I think that really, once again, it's going to be those white women. I think at the end of the day, it's going to be those white women who claimed they were for her in 2016, and 65% of them turned out not to be for her. And I think that when they see Harris, it's interesting because there's so much made of whether or not Black people see Harris as Black.
Yeah, it's just,
There's
I
so
think
much made
that's
of
so utterly stupid at
so
this
much
point.
made of that. And the thing is that the reality is that, yes, the same Black people that saw Obama as Black and that see Alicia Keys as Black and see Halle Berry as Black and see all the people that's Black also see her as Black. Stop
Right.
tripping. Okay. Who doesn't know what the heck is going on is these white women. Because I've literally heard people talking about white women, how at least with Barack, they knew that his mother was American, but you
Mm.
know, quote unquote white. They didn't say the white part, but we know what's said here, right? But with her, it's like, she's a complete foreigner. Like, this is some of the things that I
So
have
that's
heard.
more xenophobic, right?
So it's like the fact that she's a woman is already a problem, because it was a problem for Hillary Clinton for those white women.
Yeah.
And now on top of that, she is someone they're seeing as a foreign woman, right? A foreign woman of color, like not a foreign white woman. Now, if she was up here, some white Brit, they might be able to get with it, okay? But a foreign white, in their mind, she's not, but in their mind, a foreign woman of color. And that to them is a little bit of a bridge too far. And so I think what we're going to, in terms of the concerns that people have, they'll always try to make the concerns the Black people, the brown people, the Asian people, the indigenous people, because they just like to blame us for everything, even though they don't give us a damn reason to do anything for them. But in reality, it is these white women for whom their whole abortion and reproductive rights campaign is targeted, right? When you look at the ads, etc., it is those women who are the most likely to decide that, nah, Harris is a bridge too far for
Wait,
them.
so the white women who let Trump win could be the same white women against Harris?
Absolutely.
I don't even, really?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Because they didn't care. There's nothing he's done that's worse. Everything that he's doing now is the horribleness he was doing before, and they voted for him. They
yeah.
voted for
But then
him.
they voted for, well, then, I mean, the African American woman vote, we clear where it's going, but then they voted for Biden just based on their own kind of like patriarchal, the internalization of patriarchy for them is why they voted then for Biden.
Is why who voted for Biden?
Well, white women, like, right? The white women who voted for
No, I
Biden.
don't think that the white women, I don't think those same white women are the white women who voted for Trump. I don't think that they up and
Oh, okay.
flipped. I think we brought people out. We're not getting the credit for bringing people out in 2020 to stand in lines for 10 hours with COVID and all of that, right? When I say we, I'm talking about the Black, the brown, the Asian, the
Yeah,
indigenous folks, particularly women who, and queer folks, gender nonconforming folks who took it to the wall because we were clear about what kind of danger this person could be. He still got the most votes of any Republican president ever, the second most votes ever, right? Biden got the most votes ever. He got the second most votes ever. But that is because young people, like people who didn't even normally vote, turned out.
yeah,
Those same white women that were voting with their husbands, their Republican husbands, they continue to do that.
got it.
And
Yeah.
in this time around, because of Gaza, because of immigration policy, because of this, focus on enforcement and criminalization, the same crew that was willing to risk it all in 2020, I'm not hearing any of those people risking it all in 2024.
But what we know is happening is that Palestinian people are done. They're like, we're not
Yeah, that's what I'm
voting for
saying.
it. Right. So then in that sense, again, Michigan, like people like Wise Michigan is important for a couple of reasons. But look, you have a concerted strategic tactic right now from uncommitted. And then today, Rashida Tlaib went public. I'm not voting for Harris. Now, I'm going to say, I feel like all those other squad members, well, you took out Cori Bush. There's a reason they took out Cori Bush because, quote, she might be part of the squad, but she was beyond the squad and her everything she was talking about. So they spent what $3-5 million to take her out. So then you're left with AOC, who has beginning to be a disappointment. You got Ayanna Presley. You don't hear too much. Ilhan a little bit, but today Rashida was like, "F it, absolutely not." So now Rashida, as the most well-known elected Palestinian, right? They're going to be all the Palestinian people that were already there, but are going to be like, I'm going to go for everybody but the president, or I'm going to write somebody in, or I'm going to say uncommitted. Because if they go that way with Michigan, that's a wrap for Harris. And
Well,
how,
see, here's the other thing also to think about.
yeah,
Because when we look at the immigration, like the world of immigrants and immigrants of color, yes, I would say a sizable number of those people are going to, are not going to vote for Trump. I mean, that's clear. But there's also, some people are going to vote for Trump, or some people are not going to vote at all,
well,
right?
yeah,
I mean, part of the work we're trying to do as BAJI, and now our new C4 BAJI Action, is to say, hey, come out at least and let's look at these local and state races, because we don't have much to say. What can I say? Usually there's a carrot and a stick, and Baji's complaining about the stick and saying the carrot doesn't feed enough people, right? If the carrot leaves out this one, the carrot leaves out that one, and the stick beats them, those who are left out, this case, there's no carrot to even talk about. No one can talk about a carrot. No one. All they can say is this guy over here is horrible. And that works for some people, but for other people, they want to vote for someone affirmatively that they actually think is someone. And I think what the uncommitted movement shows clearly is that people will do that. I think there's a notion that people had in terms of political strategists that, hey, president is first, right? You go into that ballot box, right? And that people just go down a ballot like they go down a standardized test. People voting for judge, they don't know what darn thing about the judge. People voting for, school board and all of that. And that's typically is how people are. But I think that this national election is operating right now, that people are not automatically necessarily going to do that.
Well,
And
listen,
I
look
think,
at the third
but
parties too. Like, look, I know already if Harris loses, they're gonna get right at the Green Party and third parties. Really, the Green Party right now, we're on 40, almost 43 ballots, right? You can't win unless you're on every ballot. And everybody who always asks, what I tell people, this is the Green Party has to run. You have to run a federal election to begin to have enough of the electorate, which is 5%. We're probably super close. I don't know. I think maybe the Green Party is going to garner that. But immediately, I don't know if you've been seeing the attacks specifically on the Green Party, because we're polling from younger African American millennials, right? Like berating the Green Party and all of that. And it's like, listen, why are we even having a conversation right now about what there's only two parties? And I think that's why young people are expressing or seeing themselves, aligned with third parties, because they're tired of the duopoly. They're tired of every time this happens and they tell us it's the most crucial election, and then completely not doing anything for working people, from union people, and all of that, And I told everybody, I'm voting third party. Like, I vote my values, but I also have to understand I have a privilege of doing that in New York. But what do you think then, you know, I guess what would be, something that Baji, give us something to learn more about the organization, but also the politics of Baji, which to me are probably the most progressive of any kind of immigrant, migrant group or organization in the country.
yeah, so we're an abolitionist org, and we're an abolitionist org that is, really works hard to be abolitionist, like really working to push policies that are non-carceral, right, and that are dismantling the carceral state, and to oppose policies that are encouraging the carceral state on all of its levels, whether we're talking about prisons, whether we're talking about jails, detention, cops, immigration enforcement, child services, like any mental health institutions, enforced involuntary warehousing of people, what's happening with unhoused folks, like that is something that we care about as Baji, as part of the intersection that we believe we're at as Black people and as migrants, right, as immigrants. So that's one major piece. Another piece is that we are about Black folks generally. So there's a lot of organizations that are about for and service particular groups of Black people, or Black migrants, or migrants generally, which is good because that is needed. Baji was founded by African Americans, folks from the continent, folks from the Caribbean. So it was founded as a Black diasporic organization.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, our focus is on immigration, but we also look at migration as a human right. And we include all kinds of migration. We include what happened with Puerto Ricans, Boricuans forced out of the country, right? We include the great migrations of African American people within the country, and then even these migrations people are trying to do going home. We had a statement with Brittany Griner, right? Because her having to leave here to go to Russia and to work is an example of a Black person migrating, and why Black people migrate, right? And so
Yeah.
we focus on and try to center in terms of looking at the needs. What are the needs of our community? Centering the most vulnerable folks, centering folks who are disabled, centering folks that are trans, that are gender nonconforming, women, femmes, centering folks who don't speak, English, centering that have language access needs, that are undocumented, that are criminalized. And in so doing, we're able to not just talk about how we get our papers, because we understand George Floyd was a citizen, Breonna Taylor was a citizen. Like, what did that do for them, right? We talk about how we're able to live and thrive as human beings, and to fight criminalization, to fight exclusion, and to fight separation of Black folks from their families and communities. So when we look at it from that lens, it's why we focus a lot on the local and state when it comes to our power building work. We're in Oakland, we're in LA, we're in Houston, we're in Atlanta, we're in Miami, we're in Brooklyn, we're in DC. We focus on that because we know that there on the local and state level is where a lot of that criminalizing, exclusion, and separation happens. And then immigration is a federal issue. So, of course, we have our policy team focusing both on the national, what's happening on the Hill. But as you know, we work, in UN entities. We're going over, down to South America and parts of Mexico, Central America. We're not limiting ourselves in terms of this conversation about Black folks and our right, our human right to migrate and to thrive. And so that's what our politics are. And if you go to our website at BAJI, BAJI.org, you can see through our statements, you can see, through our reports. We have a lot of reports and research that we've done around Black migrants, around Blackness, migration, etc. That, you'll see what our politics are. We have a politic. We have a radical politic. And yet we still are moving around in this world, in all of the spaces, doing the work that needs to be done.
No, I'm really glad I learn so much from you every time because you just name all the intersectionalities and put it in a very in a different way than a lot of other organizations. So can you give out Baji's information again so people could support?
Absolutely. You can find us on the internets at www.baji.org, baji.org. We're on Instagram at instabaji. We're on what I continue to call Twitter. I guess they call it X now, at Baji Tweet. We're also on Facebook. We're on LinkedIn. I'm old as dirt and twice as funky. There are probably other places we're on that I don't know how to access, but we have a YouTube session. We've got Vimeo. So we're in all of these different spaces. Again, really pushing to make sure that that no one is forgotten, right? That when it comes to Black folks, that we are making sure that we're closing ranks, that we're doing the work that we need to do to free the people and the planet.
Well, I mean, we'll talk before the election. I'm going to bring you back right after the election, whatever happens. Again, everybody, this is the people's lawyer.
Thank you.
One of the most beautiful people ever, teaches me something new all the time. Executive director of Baji. Nana, you know how much I love you. I love you so much, and I'm just super grateful to, like I said, keep learning. But to see you and all the work you've done with Baji has been amazing too. I would always remind folks things may be bad, they might not look great, but the work that we do is the necessary intervention, especially at this moment of where we're at. So I love you. Have a good meeting tomorrow, which you're gonna say another day, but let me know what happens at that meeting tomorrow. I'm ready to hear the stories.
And there will be a story. I need to say this, Rosa, before I get off. First of
Yes,
all, I
okay.
love you and I thank you. And secondly, I need to make sure to make clear, I got the best comrades at Baji ever. Those young folks are doing the damn thing.
Yeah.
And none of this happens. I get to be out here and be Queen Mother and do the stuff that I do because we got some excellent, sharp, bright, beautiful, intentioned, committed people of integrity over here at Baji. And I'm super
next time, what I want to do with this show too is highlight younger leadership in said organizations. So in the future, we will want to talk to some of the young people, those on the ground every day. But love you. Thank you for your work. Everybody, I'll be back tomorrow with This is Black Latinx. Both shows are happening. Each one is going to be doper than the other one. And like I said, though, I want to put a panel together after the election. And, you're definitely going to be one of the people that we want on to give us here we are, here we go. And this is how we got to move at this particular moment. Love you, Nana. I'll see you soon.
Love you. Thank you. I'll be glad to do so.
Bye.